Frederick, a small town nestled in Colorado, USA, seems like any other ordinary place. Its quiet streets and lack of notable attractions render it largely unremarkable to most. Yet this town would soon be thrust into the national spotlight, forever etched in the minds of people across America and beyond. The catalyst for this notoriety was a shocking and tragic case centered around Shanann Watts, a woman who appeared to lead a perfect life. With a devoted husband and 2 adorable daughters, she was admired by many. Her successful career and seemingly happy family painted a picture of an idyllic existence. However, on the early morning of August 13, 2018, that picturesque life was shattered. Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant, returned home from a business trip. Her close friend, Nicole, had dropped her off, reminding her about an important prenatal appointment scheduled for the next morning. But as the sun rose on a new day, Shanann had seemingly vanished without a trace. Her phone lay silent, unresponsive to texts and calls. She failed to show up for her prenatal checkup, raising alarms among those who cared for her. By noon, Nicole's worry escalated into action. With her son in tow, she decided to check on her friend at home, her concern growing with every passing minute. Arriving at 2825 Saratoga Trail, Nicole stood before the spacious 5-bedroom house. The bright Colorado sun beat down, illuminating Shanann's car parked out front, a sign that she hadn't gone far. But as Nicole approached, the tightly shut doors and windows raised her unease. She knocked and called out, but silence greeted her. Peering into the windows, Nicole saw no sign of Shanann or her daughters. The house was intact, presenting no evidence of forced entry. Yet the absence of any response from inside heightened her anxiety. In a moment of desperation, Nicole reached out to Chris Watts, Shanann's husband, seeking answers about his wife and children. Chris, an operator for Anadarko Petroleum, typically left for work early in the morning. He was puzzled and claimed he had no idea where they could be. He recalled that when he left for work around 5 o'clock a.m., Shanann and the kids were still asleep. Alarmed by the news of his wife's disappearance, Chris rushed back home while Nicole contacted the police. At 1:40 p.m., an officer arrived to investigate the unsettling situation. Chris arrived shortly after, unlocking the door and ushering the police inside. The house appeared empty, with no signs of disturbance. There were no visible signs of a break-in. However, a peculiar detail caught the officer's attention: the missing bedsheets. Chris speculated that perhaps Shanann had taken the children out for the day and would return shortly. Yet, as the police conducted a thorough search, they discovered Shanann's purse, phone, and daily medications still inside the house. This alarming find raised serious questions. Who would leave home without their phone and wallet? In this day and age, such actions were highly unusual. Moreover, Shanann was a dedicated brand ambassador for a nutrition company, reliant on constant communication with her clients. Her phone was typically glued to her side, unless something was gravely amiss. As the investigation unfolded, the police began to focus their attention on Chris Watts, particularly after probing into his last conversation with Shanann. He revealed that she had been asleep when he returned home around 2 a.m. He also disclosed that they had been discussing a possible separation, prompting him to rise early, around 4 a.m. A calm conversation unfolded between Shanann Watts and her husband, Chris Watts. Their relationship had been strained in recent weeks, both emotionally overwhelmed by the weight of their issues. During this exchange, Shanann revealed her intention to take their children to a friend's house, though she withheld the name of that friend. As dawn broke, Chris Watts departed for work around 5 o'clock a.m., attempting to reach Shanann during his shift. However, his calls went unanswered, a detail that would later haunt him. Initially, Chris brushed off the silence, assuming Shanann was upset and had simply forgotten her phone. His narrative painted a picture of a couple grappling with marital strife, a mother who left in anger, and a husband who remained oblivious. This explanation seemed reasonable at first. In an effort to piece together the timeline, police collected surveillance footage from the neighborhood, hoping to confirm when Shanann and the children had left. Yet, strangely, not a single camera captured their departure. The only available footage showed Chris backing his truck into the garage at 5 o'clock a.m. and leaving at the same hour. In stark contrast, it appeared that Shanann and the children had never left the house at all. It was as though they had vanished without a trace. In a desperate search for answers, police questioned neighbors, but none reported seeing Shanann or the children. As night fell, Another day passed, shrouded in silence and uncertainty, devoid of any clues. The chilling news of Shanann and her daughter's mysterious disappearance rippled through the town, igniting rumors and wild speculation, with some even whispering of supernatural involvement. Fear and uncertainty cast a shadow over the community. To quell public panic, authorities took immediate action the following day. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the fray, deploying dozens of officers and highly trained canine units to meticulously search the Watts residence, both inside and outside. Yet tragically, the dogs failed to pick up any scent of Shanann or her children. Throughout the investigation, Chris Watts maintained his cooperation, even participating in a televised interview. On camera, he expressed his desperate hope for the safe return of his wife and daughters. In a heartfelt plea, he speculated that they may have been kidnapped, urging anyone with information to come forward. His emotional appeal resonated deeply, garnering widespread sympathy. Law enforcement took the matter with utmost seriousness, expanding the search area dramatically. Despite their efforts, including increased manpower and the widespread posting of missing persons notices, progress remained elusive. The baffling disappearance, coupled with escalating media attention, soon captured the interest of not just the local community, but the nation as a whole. Millions tuned in, hoping for the safe return of Shanann and her daughters, while the pressure mounted on law enforcement to unravel the mystery swiftly. In a pivotal turn, investigators began to delve deeper into Shanann's background. Born on January 10, 1984, in New Jersey, her family later moved to North Carolina. Described as stunning, with doll-like beauty and warm, bright eyes, her parents often referred to her as a gift from God. Tragically, life had dealt a cruel hand to the vibrant young woman. At just 25 years old, Shanann received the devastating diagnosis of lupus, a relentless autoimmune disease devoid of any cure. That same year, a serious car accident compounded her struggles, further deteriorating her already fragile health. Just as despair threatened to engulf her, fate intervened. Shanann met Chris Watts online, and their connection blossomed into something deeper. It was as if he had become her lifeline, drawing her out of the shadows of her darkest moments. With a renewed spirit, Shanann fought valiantly against her illness, her health gradually improving. On November 3, 2012, the couple exchanged vows, stepping into a new chapter. Soon after, they relocated to Frederick, Colorado, in search of a fresh start. They settled into a spacious 5-bedroom home, a symbol of their aspirations. On December 17, 2013, their joy multiplied with the birth of their first daughter, Bella. The family welcomed another blessing on July 17, 2015, when Celeste entered the world. The arrival of their 2 daughters infused Shanann with newfound strength and happiness, casting a warm glow on their marriage. She often chronicled their lives on social media, portraying a seemingly perfect family. Yet beneath the surface, financial turmoil brewed. The couple grappled with significant debt, their combined annual income hovering around $90,000. While it might appear substantial, it was woefully inadequate to meet their mounting living expenses, which included a staggering $3,000 monthly mortgage payment. In addition to the mortgage, they faced $600 in car loan payments and a crushing $70,000 in credit card debt, compounded by student loans and medical bills. By July 2014, the weight of their financial situation became unbearable, leading to a lawsuit for unpaid homeowners association fees. Under immense financial strain, Chris Watts filed for bankruptcy on June 5, 2015. At that moment, their bank accounts revealed a stark reality, just $306 remaining. Despite the overwhelming financial burdens, Shanann's affection for Chris endured. In 2017, she poured her heart into an emotional online tribute, declaring him to be the greatest blessing in her life. On June 11, 2018, the couple received exhilarating news. They were expecting their 3rd child. Shanann's heart soared with joy as she shared the news with Chris, who mirrored her excitement after a checkup confirmed they were welcoming a baby boy. They decided to name their unborn son Nico, a name filled with hope. During the investigation, police uncovered that Shanann was not just a devoted mother. She was a warm, outgoing individual, brimming with life and commitment to her family. The unsettling reality was that the prospect of Shanann Watts fleeing with her daughters seemed almost impossible. The question loomed: who had taken the mother and her children, and how had they managed to slip past the watchful eyes of surveillance cameras? In the aftermath of Shanann's disappearance, the police canvassed her friends and family, probing for any signs of unusual behavior. One resounding theme emerged from their inquiries. Shanann and Chris's marriage had recently been fraught with difficulties. Tearful messages from Shanann to her friends painted a picture of a woman in distress. In a heart-wrenching disclosure, Shanann Watts confided to her mother that Chris Watts expressed his reluctance to welcome a third child. He even suggested that their marriage was no longer viable, leading to conversations about separation. Shanann's mother, Sandra, began to share her own troubling insights into the couple's relationship. Initially, Sandra painted Chris Watts as a devoted father and husband, portraying their marriage as healthy and happy. However, she noted a disturbing shift in his behavior in recent weeks. When Shanann took their daughters, Bella and Celeste, to North Carolina for a summer vacation on June 27th, Chris chose to remain behind, only arriving 5 weeks later. One night during her trip, Shanann endured severe morning sickness. Yet Chris's apathy was striking. He showed little concern for her distress, a stark contrast to his previously caring demeanor. Sandra found this emotional distance alarming and out of character. Deeply unsettled, Sandra even voiced her suspicions to the police, expressing her belief that Chris was somehow involved in the unsettling disappearance of her daughter and granddaughters. Notably, the shift in Chris's demeanor began just after Shanann left for her vacation. Their once frequent conversations dwindled, and eventually they ceased altogether, even during their brief encounters. The couple's affection evaporated. They stopped hugging and kissing, transforming into emotionally distant strangers. This change weighed heavily on Shanann, who confided in her friends about her growing fears that Chris was seeing another woman. Her fears, it turned out, were not unfounded. Investigators uncovered Chris's communications, revealing that he had indeed been having an affair. The other woman was identified as Nicole Kessinger, a co-worker. Chris deceived Kessinger by claiming he was already divorced, all in pursuit of a relationship with her. The investigation further uncovered the timeline of their affair during Shanann's summer trip. On July 4th, Chris invited Kessinger to his home, where they engaged in an intimate encounter. By July 7th, their late-night text exchanges revealed a deepening connection. Their relationship blossomed as they went on a date to the Shelby American Collection Car Museum on July 14th, spending the night at a nearby hotel. Before heading back to North Carolina to reunite with Shanann on July 30th, Chris penned a love letter to Kessinger. On August 4th, Kessinger took a significant step, purchasing a wedding dress online, a symbol of the future she envisioned with Chris. Shanann returned home with Chris on August 7th after their summer break. Just 2 days later, on August 9th, she left for a business trip to Arizona. Meanwhile, Chris took advantage of her absence, hiring a babysitter for their children and going on yet another date with Kessinger. In truth, the affair had been ongoing for an extended period. The police uncovered that Chris's phone contained thousands of pictures of Kessinger, many of which were explicit. Although he had employed software to conceal these images, investigators managed to retrieve them, revealing the extent of his duplicity. Chris was adept at juggling the demands of both his wife and mistress. His ability to manage his time with remarkable precision was alarming. Further digging revealed that Chris had also engaged in one-night stands with other women. Notably, in February 2018, he had met a woman named Amanda through a dating app, marking yet another chapter in his web of deceit. When the police located Nicole for questioning, she painted a picture of Chris Watts as aggressive and rough in bed. Detectives began to suspect that Watts had engaged in multiple infidelities. All the evidence pointed to one undeniable truth. His feelings for Shanann Watts had completely faded. A detective, skilled in body language and psychology, scrutinized Watts's televised interview, uncovering several troubling behaviors. Throughout the interview, Watts exuded nervousness, his eyes darting about, while his arms were frequently crossed defensively over his chest. He adopted an unmistakably defensive posture when discussing his wife and children, consistently referring to them in the past tense, as if he were certain they would never return. Nicole, Shanann's close friend, also had her concerns. On the day of the incident, Nicole reported to the police 2 particularly suspicious details. When she suggested calling the authorities to search for Shanann, Watts discouraged her, claiming he didn't want law enforcement involved. Moreover, while reviewing the surveillance footage, his behavior stood out starkly. Normally calm and collected, Watts appeared visibly anxious as he watched footage of himself backing his truck into the garage. He crossed his arms, paced anxiously, and displayed clear signs of distress, as if a terrible secret was teetering on the edge of being revealed. These peculiar behaviors raised significant red flags for investigators, especially the neighbor who provided the surveillance footage. The neighbor noted something particularly unusual. Watts had never backed his truck into the garage like that before. It was an unprecedented action that struck the neighbor as highly suspicious, especially on that fateful day. Before Nicole made the call to the police, Watts was the only person seen entering and leaving the house. With such suspicion hanging over him, it was difficult to dismiss the possibility that he had done something harmful. On August 15th, 3 days after the incident, the police summoned Watts to the station for formal questioning. During the interrogation, he sat with his legs crossed, maintaining a calm and confident demeanor throughout the session. His answers seemed nearly flawless as he vehemently denied any affair. He insisted he had not harmed Shanann. Had it not been for the evidence the police had already collected, they might have taken him at his word. An FBI profiler, after meticulously reviewing the interrogation footage multiple times, observed a critical detail. Whenever Watts discussed his wife and daughter's disappearance, he unconsciously touched his neck. This body language raised suspicions in the agent's mind that Watts might have strangled Shanann. Despite his calm facade during questioning, the results of his polygraph test painted a starkly different picture. Watts scored a shocking -18, well below the threshold for deception. When he was informed that he had failed the test, as the investigation unfolded, Chris Watts's composure cracked. He became visibly distressed, his face revealing the internal conflict raging within him. Eventually, he broke down and confessed to the crime, tearfully explaining that on the morning of the incident, he had suggested a separation, setting off a tragic chain of events. Shanann Watts was deeply upset by the escalating tensions in their relationship. Following a heated argument, Chris went downstairs, only to be jolted by the sound of his children screaming. Rushing back to the bedroom, he claimed to have found Shanann strangling their daughters, a claim that would soon unravel. Overcome with rage, he confessed to strangling Shanann until her breath ceased. The garage, connected to their home, became the scene of his chilling crime. He backed his truck inside, wrapping Shanann's lifeless body in a bedsheet with cold detachment. With a grim sense of purpose, he loaded the children's bodies into the truck, driving to his work site at the oil tanks to dispose of the remains. He claimed this was the reason Shanann and the children never appeared on any surveillance footage leaving the house. However, this version of events seemed highly improbable. A loving mother, pregnant with her third child, suddenly turning into a murderer of her own daughters was a narrative that defied logic. Despite his claims, Chris Watts had confessed to killing Shanann. Investigators utilized GPS data from his truck to track the oil site, approximately 60 miles from their home. To gather more evidence, drone surveillance was deployed over the area. Officers spotted a sheet matching the description of the missing bedsheet from Watts's home. When confronted with aerial photographs, the police demanded that Chris indicate where he had concealed the bodies of his family. In a moment of chilling clarity, he marked 3 spots on the map, claiming that his wife and 2 daughters were buried there. Following these leads, investigators unearthed the bodies of Shanann and her daughters at the isolated oil field. Shanann was discovered buried in a shallow grave, covered with a bedsheet. The 2 children, however, had been unceremoniously shoved into oil tanks with narrow openings. Autopsy results confirmed what everyone feared. All 3 victims had died from asphyxiation. Shanann bore visible bruising on her neck, a broken fingernail, and a nearly 1.5-inch tear inside her mouth, all indicative of a violent struggle. Bella had a distinct injury on her left hip, and a strand of blonde hair was found attached to one of the oil tanks, a haunting reminder of the lives lost. The evidence pointed to a chilling reality. Chris Watts had forced Bella into the container. These horrifying details uncovered the extreme brutality with which he had handled the bodies of his own family. Detective Tammy, upon witnessing the victim's condition, was nearly certain that Chris Watts was the sole perpetrator of this unimaginable crime. If this had been a momentary act of rage, he would not have displayed such heartless cruelty by forcing his daughters into oil tanks, an act no father could ever justify. The implications were clear and chilling. As a result of this brutality, Chris Watts faced 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of tampering with evidence. On August 16, 2018, he made his first court appearance in Weld County, Colorado. The courtroom was filled with grief, a palpable tension hanging in the air as the reality of the situation sank in. In a heart-wrenching statement, Shanann's father expressed the profound sorrow that enveloped the family. The judge, recognizing the gravity of the crime and the potential danger to the community, denied Chris Watts bail. Despite the overwhelming evidence stacked against him and the emotional pleas from the victim's family, Chris Watts adamantly denied any responsibility. He made the shocking claim that Shanann had killed their children. During his second hearing on August 21, 2018, he pleaded not guilty to all charges. In a surprising turn, Shanann's family chose not to pursue the death penalty in hopes of negotiating a reduced sentence. They had already endured the tragic loss of 4 lives and could not bear the thought of adding another death, even that of a cold-blooded murderer devoid of humanity. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts struck a plea deal with prosecutors, admitting to murdering his wife Shanann and their 2 daughters in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The presiding judge, reflecting on the brutality of the crime, declared that the defendant had coldly and deliberately extinguished 4 lives. This was not an impulsive act. It was a calculated and heinous crime. In a chilling statement, a seasoned detective remarked that he had never encountered anything like this before. He described it as potentially the most brutal and evil crime among the thousands of cases he had handled. Ultimately, Chris Watts received 5 life sentences plus 48 years for the unlawful termination of a pregnancy. Additionally, he was sentenced to 36 years for 3 counts of tampering with evidence, bringing the total to 84 years. Although he escaped the death penalty, there was no doubt that he would never see the light of day outside prison walls. After the verdict, Shanann's father confronted Chris Watts, demanding to know the true motive behind the horrific murders. However, Watts's refusal to disclose the truth left the exact reasons shrouded in mystery, despite the evidence collected. Investigators speculated that Chris Watts was driven by a desire to escape his family and start anew with his mistress. Many believed the case would fade from public attention following the trial. Yet in September 2019, a book titled The Tragic Confessions of the Watts Family Murders reignited interest, revealing disturbing new details. The book's author, Cheryl Catal, compiled letters written by Chris Watts from prison, gathered through their correspondence. In these letters, Chris Watts divulged horrific details that even the police had been unaware of. His crimes were premeditated, showcasing a level of cruelty that was beyond comprehension. The chilling truth he described in his letters unfolded as follows. On the fateful morning of August 13th, before confronting Shanann about their separation, Chris Watts entered his daughter's room and attempted to smother them with a pillow. Miraculously, Bella and Celeste survived the ordeal. Later, in a heated argument with Shanann, he strangled her to death. When their daughters woke up and inquired about their mother, Chris deceitfully told them that Shanann was sick. He then loaded Shanann's lifeless body and the girls into his truck. He drove to an oil site, the girls sitting unaware, their mother's body lying lifeless at their feet. Tragically, they were far too young to grasp the horror of what had just occurred or that they were next in line. Upon reaching the desolate oil site, Chris Watts committed an unimaginable act. In a calculated fury, he strangled his youngest daughter, Celeste. The horror unfolded before the eyes of his older daughter, Bella, who, in a state of sheer terror, cried out, fearing for her own life. "Am I going to be like my sister?" she asked, a question that would haunt any parent. Watts remained silent, his heart devoid of compassion as he turned his attention to Bella next. Her desperate plea echoed in the chilling air, "Please, Daddy, no!" In those final moments, the innocence of childhood was snuffed out, leaving behind an unbearable void. In letters penned during his time in custody, Watts confessed to having attempted to poison Shanann, hoping she would miscarry. His ultimate ambition was not just to escape his family, but to build a new life with his mistress, Nicole Kessinger. These revelations painted a grotesque picture of his motives. Outrage is a natural response to such depravity. The very thought of these acts sends shivers down the spine. Watts's confession validated the police's theories about his motives. While marital strife is not uncommon, the path he chose was one of extreme and unforgivable brutality. Even the wildest creatures protect their young, yet Watts's actions revealed the darkest depths of human nature, showcasing a chilling cold-bloodedness that is utterly terrifying. One can only wonder what thoughts coursed through his mind as he watched his daughters slip away in the dead of night. Did he hear their cries, echoes of pain and betrayal that now linger in the shadows of his isolation? But in the end, none of that matters. Cold steel bars and heavy chains now define his existence. His remaining years will crawl by, steeped in isolation and regret, perhaps the most fitting punishment for such heinous crimes. What is perhaps most shocking is that even within the confines of prison, Watts found himself the recipient of numerous love letters. Many women, inexplicably drawn to him, expressed their feelings, some even sending explicit photographs. They described him as one of the kindest-looking men they had ever seen, revealing an unsettling fascination with his dark persona. This phenomenon is difficult to comprehend. However, it is not entirely unheard of in the annals of infamous criminal cases, where the line between villain and romanticized figure often blurs. Notably, the Netflix documentary, American Murder: The Family Next Door, which premiered on September 30, 2020, reconstructs the timeline of the crime using authentic footage and recordings, shedding light on the hidden cracks within the facade of the Watts family. Many convicted felons have received romantic letters from admirers, some even finding love and marriage while behind bars. The tragic story of the Watts family has since inspired multiple films and television specials, captivating audiences with its dark narrative. In what appeared to be a perfect family life, the Watts case concluded with Chris's life sentence, yet its haunting echoes continue to resonate in the public's consciousness. The heartbreaking deaths of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn baby Nico remain an irreplaceable tragedy, a dark chapter in the story of human relationships. This case leaves behind valuable lessons and complex perspectives on the individuals involved. Chris Watts, once perceived as a loving husband and devoted father in his community, ultimately revealed himself as a monster cloaked in a human facade, a stark reminder of the potential for darkness that resides within us all. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Chris Watts, once perceived as a loving husband and devoted father by his community, harbored a dark secret. He was a monster, lurking behind a carefully constructed human facade, leaving behind valuable lessons and complex perspectives on the individuals entangled in this tragic narrative. Chris Watts's heinous crimes were not merely the byproduct of a blind passion for Nicole Kessinger. They unveiled a disturbing cocktail of extreme selfishness, cowardice, and a complete absence of accountability. Instead of tackling his marital struggles like an adult, Watts opted for murder, believing it to be his escape route. He wove a web of lies, but ultimately, the truth emerged, undeniable and harsh. In the end, he faced the consequences, trading his freedom for a life behind bars. The Watts case stands as a stark warning for anyone tempted by infidelity. Consider the repercussions of your choices. Choose responsibility over reckless, irreversible actions. This concludes today's video. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Goodbye.